shadows in the ink. The rain in London was not a drizzle, it was a deluge, a relentless grey curtain that veiled the streets of Mayfair. Inside the Obsidian Club, the air was thick with the scent of expensive bourbon and the low hum of deals being made in the dark. Elias Thorne sat in a corner booth, his presence like a whetted blade. As a lawyer known for dismantling witnesses and ironclad contracts alike, he was a man who thrived on control. He watched the door, waiting for the one person who had managed to outmaneuver him in the city archives. The heavy oak doors swung open, and Clara Vance stepped into the amber light. She was an archivist by trade, a keeper of forgotten secrets, but she moved with a confidence that unsettled Elias. She carried the scent of the rain and something deeper, old paper and dried ink. In her hand was a leather-bound folder that Elias knew contained the missing link to the Carrington case. She didn't look like a rival. She looked like a storm contained in silk. Elias stood as she approached, the height difference forcing her to look up, though she didn't flinch. "You have the ledger, Clara," he said, his voice a low vibration. "The one that proves my client's innocence, or your employer's guilt." Clara leaned in, the heat between them immediate and undeniable. "I have many things, Elias," she whispered, "but I don't give them up to men who think they can simply take what they want." The intellectual sparring was a dance they had performed for months, but tonight the air felt electric. The tension became too restrictive for the public eye. Without a word, they left the Obsidian Club, stepping out into the cold London night. The rain lashed against Elias's black umbrella as he held it over her, their shoulders brushing. "The library," she said, her voice barely audible over the thunder. "If you want the truth, you have to see where it lives." They walked in silence, the rhythm of their footsteps syncopated with the frantic beating of their hearts. Her private library was a sanctuary of shadows and scent. Floor-to-ceiling shelves groaned under the weight of centuries-old volumes. The air was heavy with the aroma of aged leather and the faint, sweet musk of Clara's perfume. She didn't turn on the lights. Instead, she lit a single candle on a massive mahogany desk. The flicker of the flame danced in her eyes, making the secret she carried feel like a physical weight in the room. Elias followed her to the desk, his gaze fixed on her. "Show me," he commanded, but the ruthlessness in his voice had softened into a rasp. Clara laid the folder down but kept her hand on it. "This ledger contains a secret that could ruin lives, Elias, including yours." She stepped closer, her breath hitching as he placed his hand over hers on the cold leather. The power dynamic shifted. The rivalry was no longer about the law, but about the magnetic pull between them. The intellectual wall finally crumbled. Elias reached out, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw with a tenderness that contradicted his reputation. "I didn't come here for the ledger, Clara," he admitted, his voice dropping an octave. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering shut. "I know," she breathed. The slow burn of their months of professional animosity ignited into a sudden, desperate heat. He pulled her flush against him, the friction of their clothes a prelude to the skin-to-skin contact they both craved. He lifted her onto the edge of the mahogany desk, scattering papers to the floor. The sound of shifting parchment was drowned out by the rain drumming on the skylight above. Elias's hands were everywhere, untying silk, finding the warmth of her skin. Clara's fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer as their mouths met in a kiss that was both a battle and a surrender. The scent of ink and old books became the backdrop for a much more primal discovery. The library, once a place of quiet study, became a theater of intense passion. Every touch was an interrogation, every gasp a confession. Elias moved with a calculated grace, his usual control giving way to a raw, hungry need that Clara matched with her own fierce brilliance. They were no longer lawyer and archivist. They were two souls stripped of their titles, finding a dangerous, beautiful rhythm in the dark. The rain outside continued to pour, sealing them in a world of their own making. As the first grey light of dawn touched the London skyline, the rain finally tapered to a soft mist. Inside the library, Elias and Clara remained wrapped in each other's arms on a velvet chaise lawn. The ledger lay forgotten on the desk, its secrets no longer the most important thing in the room. They had moved beyond rivalry into a pact of silence and desire. The world would wake up to the same laws and facts, but for Elias and Clara, everything had changed in the shadows. Elias watched the city stir, his mind already calculating their next move, but his heart was anchored to the woman beside him. He looked at Clara, seeing not just a brilliant mind, but a partner. The ruthless Mr. Thorne had found a weakness he intended to protect with everything he had. Clara smiled, a secret, knowing expression. "The case is still there, Elias," she whispered. He kissed her temple. "Let it wait. The world can wait." They stood together, eventually, and walked back to the desk. The folder was still there, a symbol of their beginning. Elias picked it up and handed it to her. "Keep it safe," he said. "The truth belongs to you." They walked to the door, stepping out into the fresh, rain-washed air of London, ready to face the day as allies forged in the heat of a Mayfair night.